Greetings from London. I send my apologies for not being able to join you in person to celebrate life and to hear about all of the wonderful work that the different federated members of One of Us have been doing. Here in the United Kingdom, we are living in a time of darkness. With over 9 million abortions since the Abortion Act was legislated in 1967, we are now seeing an aggressive effort from Westminster to amend the protections afforded the unborn child in Northern Ireland. I had the honour last month to give evidence before a House of Commons Select Committee on this very issue. The premise behind these efforts is that the unborn child has no worth whatsoever. In a shocking, albeit non-binding legal decision, the President of our Supreme Court, Lady Hale, went so far as to compare laws which require a woman to take her child to term to forcing a woman to endure living with a parasite for 9 months, which is using the mother's body and her organs to quote-unquote filter the poisons from its body. She referred to the unborn child in such circumstances as an invader. Now, this type of dehumanizing rhetoric is reminiscent of older, darker times, when ideology was used to dehumanize the Jew in Germany or the black slave in the United Kingdom or America. What is perhaps most shocking is that this rhetoric is not coming from a fringe group of radicals. These are the words of our members of Parliament and our highest, most respected judges in this land. We need your efforts more than ever. We need to be promoting the culture of life and defending the dignity of the unborn child in a way that kicks at the darkness until it bleeds daylight. One way that we're trying to accomplish this is through the courts and through the democratic process. As some of you may be aware, next Monday, on the 25th of March, my colleague Paul Diamond and I will be arguing the case of the One of Us European Citizens Initiative before the Grand Chamber of the Court of Justice in Luxembourg. We have challenged the ruling of the General Court, which held that the European Commission enjoys a near monopoly on initiating legislation and therefore has almost unfettered discretion in choosing what legislative measures it wishes or does not wish to take. We must never forget the reason that the European Citizens Initiative exists in the first place. Following the failure of European efforts to adopt a constitution, the Union was in an existential crisis. It was evident that the EU suffered from a perception that there is a significant democratic deficit in the manner it operates. Europeans had become suspicious of the European Union as a democratic entity, and this showed in the resounding referendum losses the Constitution endured in both the Netherlands and in France. One of the proposed solutions to this perceived democratic deficit was the creation of a legal instrument under the Treaty of Lisbon, which touted that each European citizen would enjoy direct participation in initiating legislative proposals if certain conditions were met. Most notably, that the legislative proposals fell within an area of EU competency, that within a 12-month period from registration of the ECI, that it collected at least 1 million statements of support, and finally, that these statements of support represented a certain proportion of the EU citizenry. Now that is exactly what One of Us did. It was able to collect more than 1.7 million certified signatures, in reality 2 million. In doing so, it has become the most successful and supported ECI in the history of ECIs. Now, one of the things we hope to stress to the court is the cost and effort that goes into making a successful ECI. So, for example, the financial cost of the initiative was more than 150,000 euros. The initiative involved thousands of volunteers. In Italy alone, there were more than 5,000 volunteers gathering signatures. Now, using the conservative estimate that 10 minutes worth of effort was required to acquire each signature, a little less for electronic signatures and a little more for paper signatures, between citizen signatories and volunteer time, it would have taken approximately 17 million minutes to collect the signatures gathered by the One of Us ECI. For a single person working 24 hours a day, nonstop, this would equate to nearly 33 years worth of work. The challenge of organizing a successful ECI is so great, in fact, that to date, only 4 ECIs have been successful. Nearly 7 times this number of ECIs have been rejected at the registration level, and nearly 5 times as many have been withdrawn. Despite the Herculean effort involved in a successful ECI, the Commission somehow still suggests that it has a near absolute authority to reject any successful ECI it sees fit, and for nearly any reason at all. Of the 4 successful ECIs, One of Us is the only ECI which has had all of its legislative proposals rejected by the Commission. Its reasoning for doing so was unapologetically weak and amounted to what we call in legal terms manifest error. We are now 12 years on from the period when Lisbon was signed by the EU member states, and the Union is nowhere closer to solving its perceived democratic deficit problem. If anything, what Brexit shows us is that Europeans have lost even more faith in the European institutions since the referendums which sealed the fate of the failed constitution. On Tuesday, we will frame the issue itself as a referendum on the relative health of the EU as a democratic institution. We will be clear with the judges that any of their votes against One of Us will be a vote against 2 million of Europe's citizens who believed the EU when it said it wanted its citizens to enjoy direct participation in the legislative process, which they promised would be accomplished through the European Citizens' Initiative. What the lower court ruled in essence was not that there is a perceived democratic deficit within the European Union. I believe that it made it very clear that there is a very real democratic deficit within the European Union where the Commission is king and can overrule the will of the people no matter how many millions of citizens make their intentions clear through the democratic process that they wished for something better. When we finally live in a time where abortion is no longer practiced, where it is viewed with moral repulsion and historical shame, I believe we will look back on the ECI as a watershed moment in the culture of death. With 2 million people taking a stand for life through the democratic process, the powers that be within the European Commission were not even institutionally honest enough to send the proposal to the European Parliament for the proper debate it deserved. The Commission was, of course, fine to express its institutional will with regard to another of the successful ECIs, that animal testing be regulated with the hope that it would be eventually stopped within Europe. Yet when it comes to experimenting on the human embryo, it showed no such mercy. It is no secret that the ECI has been a failure. It's not fit for purpose. This has been recognized as such last Tuesday when the Parliament voted by a supermajority of 535 votes in favor with only 90 votes against that the ECI be made more citizen-friendly. While these changes are not definitive as to the outcome of our case, they do hold persuasive weight in evidencing that the Commission acted against the word and the spirit of the ECI for one reason and one reason only. That being its viewpoint that unborn life is not worthy of protection. I ask, what kind of democracy is it where the Commission will only initiate citizen-driven legislation if they agree with it? There's absolutely no point to it if the Commission already freely initiates its own legislation, which by definition it already agrees with. We ask for your prayers on Monday. Your efforts made history by becoming the most supported ECI in our time. It's time to make history once again, this time through the courts. The vision of One of Us is worthy of robust defense. The unborn child is worthy of every effort we can bring to bear in his defense. This is a battle we must fight. It is a battle by the grace of God we will win. Thank you, and God bless you.